Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, Vandia's back with Carpe Vanguard deck profile. So if I could just like, comment, subscribe, and switch already. This time we're covering Lianorn Masques for set 10. Okay, all around the new Lianorn deck, I like the way this one went. It's one of my favorite Masques because it felt like it changed the way the deck actually plays. Yes, you still get your standard 3 boosters, but instead of getting bigger attacks out of it, you instead get smaller attacks, but with multi-attack guaranteed. And it's 50-50, but I really do like the way they went because the way this deck can be played, at least the way I play it, you can technically go back and forth between two different playstyles, or the other ones just feels like they're playstyle extenders. That's how it feels to me, and I'm glad that we got this new Lianorn. So let's go and get the start shot and we can see what I mean by this. First up today, we have our starter announcing Wind of Spring Quota Fee. Grades of boost 5k, shield 6k base. Auto when she's rolled upon, if you win second, draw a card. Standard starter, no special, it's just a free draw if you win second. All around, pretty cool. You can really win any starter because none of the ride line requires core fee, but I do like to run core fee because it fits the theme, and honestly, she just looks cool, so one of in the red deck. Then we have our Overtrigger and Source Dragon Deity as Blessfavor of Blessings Blessfavor. Grades of boost 50k shield, 5k power. Overtrigger, you may have an Overtrigger in your deck, or when revealed as a trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one of these +1 mana for the turn, and revealed it during draw check, activate its additional effect, which is you can draw a card, choose one mutes, it gets +1 critical for the turn, all your farm gets +10, and then if you're damaged with the same number of cards of your opponents or more, you can choose a card from your damage on and heal it. All around, pretty good card because it's an everything bagel. You just get a free heal, and you get a draw, and then you get another draw, and then, well, you guarantee to get the draw in a million, then you can get the heal, the draw, the crit, the +10, all of it. Technically, you have to do in the order that it's listed, but still all around pretty solid. Basically, if you drive check this, your opponent's either going to guaranteedly lose the game that turn, or they're going to have a much harder time beating you because you just put a big gap between your resources and your opponent's resources, and probably the damage count too. So all around, Blessfavor is a pretty solid Overtrigger. I like it a lot. It's really fun using, and I love making my everything bagel joke. So one of Blessfavor. Then we have our normal triggers. First, we run 2 copies of Frenzied Harris, creates a boost 15k shield, 4k power. Front trigger to Godric, if the opponent's vanguards are great 3 guards plus 5k shield. Okay, running this in Lianorn before was kind of 50-50 because you really ran it for the shield value because already you could just put boosters. You give the trigger power to the boosters and then they would still be pretty decent numbers outside of Resonate Dragon. Then you would obviously put it to the thing that's going to restand, but you wouldn't really need to run fronts outside of guard power. But here, running Frenzied Harris at a 2 of is still pretty solid because especially when you're going to do multi-attack. And just like in my old Lianorn build, I somehow see this front as often as I would if I ran it at 4 of another decks, which doesn't make sense, but logic is irrelevant in this case, especially when I'm building the deck. So 2 of Frenzied Harris, because the 20k shield is nice and the +10 to front row when you're doing Persona Ride shenanigans and double restands fun. And we have 2 copies of Serene, Maiden, Lena, grades of boost, 5k shield, 4k base. Just like Frenzied Harris, when it's placed on guard circle, it's a 5k extra shield, so 10k shield if your opponent's vanguards are grade 3 or greater. And also just like Frenzied Harris, I somehow see this as much as I would in a deck that I run this at a 4 of. Again, I don't understand the logic behind these, it just happens. You see, anyone that tries to put logic on how I play decks and how I respond with decks, you go ahead and stop. Logic doesn't apply to me. I make my own logic. Well, what was the quote I heard once before? Oh yes, physics wasn't invented back in my day. Well, physics don't exist when I'm involved, so yeah, 2 of these 2. And then we have our 7 crits. First up, we have 3 copies of Medalia Pomera, grades of boost 15k shield, 5k power. You can really win any crit you want with this one, as long as it's a vanilla crit, but might as well run this one for the theme. And then we have 4 copies of Aspirating Maiden Alana, grades of boost 15k shield, 4k power, critical trigger, auto rear at the end battle, she boosted, predator soul, choose one, gets +2k for the turn. All around pretty solid because it does get you a soul, and on rare occasions, it's still possible. It's just on rare occasions, mainly if you don't go into Masques right away, you are going to run into a soul problem. Again, mainly that one, but there you will run into it eventually at some point, most likely. So being able to just get a free soul at some point is pretty nice with it being a 2k, especially because you're not restanding the back row. Therefore, finally, you can shuffle her to soul and not minus from it, which is why I love the Masques, because there have been so many games where that screwed me over, where I would have really wanted to call Alana, but it wouldn't have been worth it because I wouldn't be able to proc off Resonance Dragon. Thankfully, now I can. So 7 crits. We got the 2 draws and 2 fronts, and then we have 4 copies of Flowery Tone. Our grades will boost 15k shield, 5k power. Just a standard heal that has nothing special about it. I don't really like the counter heals too much. They're too situational for me. If you want to run the counter heals, go ahead. But like I said, they're too situational for me, and obviously this deck is not meant to be anything meta or compete with competitive. If you haven't guessed now, I'm not a competitive player, so by all means, there's that. But yeah, run what you want. But I do prefer this heal, and just the fun story behind it. I remember for a long time, I think maybe even now, or if not now, up until this deck was built in tabletop, I had this listed as LG Pixie because when I first brought it into the tabletop and I changed the image, I forgot to change the name, and for the longest time it was stuck as LG Pixie, so there's that. So 4 Flowery Toner in my mind is now LG Pixie. Then move on to our grade 1s, the majority of the list, basically. First up, we have 4 copies of Custodial Dragon. Grade 1 boost fight 0 Sosuke base. Contains something you have to force in deck. Almost put a guard circle. Choose when it cannot be in the battle. And if your hand has 2 more cards, 2 cards from its card. A standard PG. No special about it basically means if this only one card can be placed on guard circle, you don't have to drop one, which is great because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game. Which, especially with the new Masques card, the deck definitely runs into more hand problems quicker, the way I play it, if you went second and you went for that Persona right turn immediately because you're not getting that free triple drive. Now, that is great because that means you're going to be super aggressive on first grade 3 turn and then drop down the PG, so when your opponent tries to counterattack with what little resources they have left, you can just quickly shut down the big attack with 1 card. All around, Custodial Dragon is pretty solid. It can save you from a bad situation that you've pretty much put yourself in because you went all in on the offense and left little to no thing for defense. But then at the same time, you can also run Plan to Prevent because it does the same exact thing. But because Custodial Dragon came up with Lianorn, might as well run it in Lianorn, right? So 4 Custodial. Then we have 4 copies of Lively Rhythm Biara. I don't know why I can't talk now in these deck profiles. Grade 1 boost by Kishode, AK base. She has slowly become less useful in this deck, but she's still useful for on-hit pressure. So grade 1, I already went over stats, but auto rear guard, when the attack she boosts hits a Vanguard, put a Great Drill Scar from hand, soul, draw a card. So with you no longer focusing on soul blasting and boosting with the entire back row, because while yes, the deck still has its focus on that, it no longer really feels like the main focus anymore. You don't really need her to hit anymore because the soul is no longer a relevant thing too much, but being able to proc off that on hit and draw is so very nice, especially because in the situations where you might want to stay on OG Lianorn, being able to get a free soul and draw is just a good plus. So for Bayar, she's just a solid good one, and she definitely helps out a lot with handling the deck's soul problems and sometimes just hand filtering in general. Then we have 4 copies of Performing Petal Diantha. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, AK base. I forgot to change the E to an A. I knew something looked weird. Auto unleashes placed on rear guard from your hand. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, by Counterblast, you won't choose a grade 3 or less card from your drop zone, call it to rear guard. Okay, there's a reason why it says it's a grade 3 or less, but it has to be called from hand for this, because technically speaking, if that wasn't the case, you could just loop out one after the other, and then just get another one, and then make a whole board with just Dianthas and then one other card because you dropped 4 CB for this. But either way, it's a very solid grade 1 because it helps you get another rear guard onto board, which is great. If you combine it with either the 2 Lianorns, technically speaking, you can get a 3rd card on board because the original, or not the original, but the second one allows you to draw a card. Therefore, you can just call that card to rear guard, so you have a 3rd one. And then the new one, you could just use the skill of just to call a different grade 1, so you have a total of 3. All around, pretty solid. And then continues rear guard during turn. If you have 2 more back row grade 1 or less rear guards, it gets plus 5k power. All around, pretty solid because she also counts herself, meaning if, you know, she and any other grade 1, and most likely you have your ride deck grade 1, are in the back row, free plus 5. All around, I like Diantha's skill a lot. She's very great for getting out rear guards, very good for numbers. Just a solid grade 1, especially when you want to swing with it for the sake of, you know, Lianorn's restand, so 4 of. Then we have 4 copies of one of my other favorite grade 1s in this deck, and that is Marching Debut Purite. Grade 1 boost 5k shield, AK base. Another instance where the name on here is wrong because this was taken this morning and I forgot to change the English names, or the names on here from the Japanese ones to the English. Continues rear guard during turn. If you have 3 or more grade 1 less rear guards, it gets plus 5k power. It's pretty much the same thing as this one, but requires you to, you know, have a little bit more pressure on it. Now, here's what I like about this deck. Just like my old one, you can grade 1 rush your opponent, because while yes, this thing's first skill is restricted to your being at grade 3, both of their 5k skills are not restricted to you being at grade 3. So if you just go, or like grade 2 turns, something where I rush, so you call your grade 1 from Soviet skill, you call Marching Purite, and then you call literally any other grade 1. If you want to call Diantha, you can. Boom, guarantee this is a 13k base. Your Vanguard's probably swinging for 23, and if you call Diantha to the front row, cool, you have 2 13k rear guards, or if you call something behind Purite, you probably have a 21k column. For Purite, just a solid grade 1 that can allow for rush, and same with Diantha, and that's why I love this deck, because it can put on so much pressure from turn 2 just by pure rushing, and your opponent can't stop it because they have to drop guard on that, and then the next turn comes around where you either have triple drive or we have access to Masques, one of the 2. Then we have 4 copies of our last grade 1 in the main deck, and that is Sprouting Intimacy Amalia. Grade 1 boost 5k shield, AK base, continues rear guard during your turn. If your Vanguard is specifically Servitude of Ferno Procession, Lianorn Masques, she gets plus 5,000 power and auto rear guard. At the end of the battle, she attacked anything, whether it's Vanguard or rear guard, as long as you know Masques attack. Actually, yeah, as long as Masques attack. By soul blasting one, retiring herself, she can countercharge 1. All around, a pretty solid skill, because yes, this is where probably the soul problem can come in, so Bayar is really helpful for that. But also, you know, being able to countercharge, which now counterblast has taken the more problem of the deck, so being able to refund that resource is also very nice. And not to mention the fact that she's a guaranteed 13k base. The only problem I have with her is the fact that she has to be on Funeral for any of that ability to go off, which is why I originally didn't like her. But then, considering I played the deck more and realized how often you're going to be on funeral most of the time, yeah, I kind of stopped caring and just started running cards like 4 of. So for Amalia, granted she's a vanilla until you get to Masques, but most likely you're going to be on Masques 95% of the game, so you're probably fine. Then we have our last grade 1. It's the grade 1 of the ride deck, none in the main deck, of 1 of copy of Budding of Pleasant Sounds Gracia. Grade 1 boost 5k shield, AK base. Auto when she's rode upon by Brilliant Tune Rectinia. You may call this card to rearguard. It is not a mandatory, it's a may, which is something I kept forgetting about, and when Urara pulled this off against Tamari, I literally had to pause the episode, go look up what Gracia does, and then make sure Urara wasn't cheating just for the sake of winning a card game, which she wasn't, even though I'm disappointed in that, but whatever. And she's rearguard. During the battle, this unit boosted a Vanguard, she gets plus 5k power. Okay, pretty solid because it's a 13k base, which is great for boosting Vanguard, sadly, which is why you don't put in the main deck, because I originally tried to put in main deck and it was not a good idea. So yeah, it's solid for boosting the Vanguard, and it's a decent kill target, but no one in the right mind is going to kill it because, you know, it only works if you boost the Vanguard, though half the time you're going to be boosting the Vanguard anyways. But it's glad that its skill doesn't require the Vanguard skill to go off, it just requires it to boost a Vanguard. So 1 of in the right deck of Gracia, none in the main deck because it's vanilla in the main deck. And then we have our grade 2s, the only one in the main deck, and it's 4 copies of Dragon Tree Wretch Adept Elwith. Grade 2 and a 5k shield, 10k base. Auto when it's placed on rear guard circle by Crown Blasting 1 and Soul Blasting 1. Choose one of your rear guard circles without any Dragon Tree markers on it and put a Dragon Tree marker on that circle. And then search back to 1 Mask of Herudagarm, reveal it, put it to your hand and stuff your deck. All around pretty solid because, while yes, it does cost both resources that both Lianorns like in their own respective regions, that being Crown Blast and Soul Blast. What I've learned from this deck, mainly from Dragjewel, is that you can just Soul Blast out the grade 3 and then proceed to use the new grade 3's effect to bind that grade 3 or remove from game that grade 3 from drop zone. Therefore, technically, you abuse the resources to the much extent you can. But anyways, it gets a deck search and can possibly lead you into getting a Masques, and not to mention the fact it can get you Dragon Tree markers. And in this deck, unlike Dragjewel, where in my mind the Dragon Tree markers are not that important, it is definitely helpful here and important here because if you're not Persona riding, most of the time you're having 13k swings, which isn't good because mainly you're just swinging with grade 1s, so you might as well, you know, get the marker out and get at least an extra 5k. So for Adept Elwith, this deck is probably tied with first of most useful of who the Draco Tree cards is with Zorga because, yeah, the extra 5k kind of puts a little bit more pressure. Then we have our last grade 2, it's the grade 2 of the ride deck, none in the main deck, of Brilliant Tune Rectinia. Grade 2 and 5k shield, 10k base. Auto when she's rode upon by a unit of Lianorn and its card name. Soul Blast, which is a grade 1 or less card from your drop zone, call it to rear guard. Okay, you will never use this ability. The only time you use this ability is if you are forced to. Like, your opponent has nuked your board, or you have bricked, and all your grade 1s have ended up in drop, and the only way for you to make plays this turn is to willingly sacrifice one of your 2 remaining soul cards. That is when you use Rectinia. And even then, you're probably sacrificing your last one because this thing was played, so hopefully, for the love of God, you have the ability to go into Masques this turn, and if you don't, well, your Lianorn's going to be a vanilla turn. Because I tell you what, it sucks having to choose between willingly going into triple drive and willingly not going into triple drive for the sake of more attacks. Especially when to get more attacks, you have to call PG down. So, one of Rectinia, she does, and then her continues rear guard circle. If you have 3 or more rear guards, she gets boost. That's never helpful. Like, these are all 13k boosters, except for this one, which is an on hit, and except for this one, which you're never gonna call. So, you know, there's no real reason to run her in the main deck, but she's okay for her skill, though you never really use it. So, 1 of in the right deck of Rectinia. Then we move on to our grade 3s. First up, we run 2 copies of Mask of Herudagarm, the grade 3 normal order that gets us to the Masques. So grade 3 normal order, like I said, look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Choose up to 1 unit card with Draco Tree or Masques in its card name from Modern Reveal, put it to hand and shuffle your deck. So you don't have to get a card, but you know, it's a way to get your Masques for Persona rides, or it's a way to get this thing to search more of them, or just get more Draco Tree markers in general. So all around pretty solid, that is for free. And then active drop zone, if you have a grade 3 Vanguard without Masques in its card name, reveal a grade 3 with Masques in its card name from your hand, ride it, the card revealed for the cost of stand. And if you rode, put this card into your soul. If your opponent's Vanguards are grade 3 or grade, and you do not Persona Ride this turn, you can activate Persona Ride. Okay, I think I went over in the Zorga build. If I didn't, I went over in the Estrella build, and I know I learned about it in the Zorga build, I just didn't say it. But I had basically talked about how you can use the other Masques in their respective nation because it doesn't require you to ride on a specific Masques. So you can run the Zorga one in Lianorn. And I thought that was powerful. Then I thought about it just now. If you have big, beefy, roaming prison dragons, you can Alka Magic while you're on regular Zorga, and then use Mask of Herudagarm to go into Lianorn, and then you not only have a Persona ride, but while yes, you do have less power compared to Zorga, you have 2 rear guards that have double crits on them that can restand. I feel like I just figured out what's going to be meta on pure accident, just by the basis of me looking at a card. Ooh, that's going to be interesting to hear about later. Someone tell me if that works out. I'm curious now. I'm not going to do it myself, but I'm curious to see if that works out. Either way, though, being able to get a free Persona by going second is solid, and not to mention the fact it gets you a free soul as well. And again, it does everything it does for free. There's no reason not to like this. And having an ability to search it too is amazing, and its ability to search a searcher is great too, and the card that it wants to proc off the skill of, and you can use the same skill in the same turn, so, you know, top 5, get it to drop zone, and then use the skill to get it into Persona Ride. It's solid. So 2 of Masques for Regards, just a solid grade 3, and I like it a lot. Then we have 4 copies of the star of the show, Servitude of Funeral Procession, Lianorn Masques, grade 3 to 9 Persona 13k base, continuous, can only be written from a grade 3 Lianorn's card name, so it can count herself. Active Vanguard, once per turn, move a card with Lianorn's different card name from this unit from your hand, solo drop zone. So if you do the play I'm thinking about, then technically speaking, yes, you won't be able to do the remove from gameplay, even though, unless you want to like willingly make your spaces hard on yourself. But you choose a grade 1 card from your drop zone, call it to rear guard, and then choose an opponent's rear guard and murder it. Okay, great. So you get, most likely, you're probably going to get either Amalia back or this one, because this one's not going to do anything outside of be a 13k beat stick. And then what you can do is you can kill an opponent's rear guard, which is great, because you get to pick the one, and they don't. So, you know, like I said before, you can use Depth out with the Soul Blast out of Leonorn, and then get the Mass Search and get a Draco marker, and then just use Masques skill to remove from game the Leonorn that you just sent to drop zone, call a grade 1, and then kill an opponent's rear guard. All around, good skill. And then Auto Vanguard, when she attacks, you have to 3 back row standing rear guards with boost, and boost this unit with them. And then if you boosted this unit with 3 or more units at the end of the battle, you may counterblast 1 and choose 2 of your rear guards and stand them. All around a very solid skill, because like I said, with that Roman Prism Dragon play, it can lead to some stupid shenanigans. And not to mention the fact as well, it can just get numbers on her own. Again, the only downside really is the fact that you're no longer swinging for bigger columns, you're just swinging for more attacks. You don't necessarily have to swing for 5 attacks, you can still swing for 4, because what you can do is instead of standing the front row, you can instead just stand a column. I mean, it's kind of less power most likely, but you are at least getting more power than you would from the 2 attacks. So I like how Lianorn Masques can interchange between being a old type of play style, though then again, if that's the case, you're kind of screwing yourself by not staying on regular Masques, but it's situation calls for it, or you can go with new style of multi-attack. Either way, Masques is just a solid grade 3. I like her skill a lot, and I think she's great, so easy 4 for me. And then we have one of in the ride deck, none in the main deck of our very last card in the deck, and that is Grand March of Full Bloom Lianorn. So a grade 3 turn Persona, 13k base, active Vanguard, once per turn by counterblasting 1, you draw a card, choose a card from your hand, and call it to rear guard circle or discard it. Okay, I always forget to use that skill, but that's just great, because unless you are that conscious about your counterblast, this is paying you to call rear guards. You are just counterblasting to replace a card in your hand with another, and then the card you're replacing just gets called, which is great. And then you can use it with Diantha to get another rear guard out of it. So yes, CB2 to call 2, but you're getting a draw out of it too, which is great. And then her other skill is Auto Vanguard. When this attacks into anything by soul blasting 1 and ditching 1, where you boost with all your back row units. You boost this unit with all your back row standing units with boost. And then if you boosted this unit with 3 or more units, this unit gets +1 drive for the battle. At the end of the battle, choose 2 of your back row rear guards to stand them. Okay, all around, pretty solid skill, because, you know, it can get triple drive, and then it also is able to make your columns bigger. So again, if you're going for the sake of not going for multi-attack that turn, just going for bigger numbers, obviously you want to go into this Lianorn or stay on this Lianorn, because the difference of drive checks does genuinely make such a huge difference. Like, I know I sack so much more triggers going with Lianorn. It has made me realize how many triggers I actually sacked on the 3rd drive check compared to this one, where now that I only have 2, I sack so little triggers. Like, if I'm going for power, I'm always going to stay on this one, but if I'm going for like pure pressure, Lianorn Masques is the way to go. But I do like how the deck feels like it can change either between them. And if you want to run this Lianorn in the main deck at more copies, you can. Though in my opinion, I would not suggest it, because the deck works perfectly fine, and you really only need 1 copy of this to put pressure on your opponent with the retire thing. But then again, yeah, if you're playing against a lot of decks that retire your rear guards, you might want to tech in a few extra copies just in case. And then, what is technically the last card, but it doesn't go in the main deck, it goes outside of the main deck. That is the Draco marker. So, you know, during your turn, if it's on a circle, if it's on any circle, regardless of a Vanguard or rear guard, if you have a Vanguard, Draco Masques in its card name, all units on that circle get plus 5k power during your turn. So, pretty solid. You know, Eloise tends to be a 15k on this, or you put any of your grade 1s, basically any of these 3 on there, and they're probably 18k bases, because all their respective skills give them the 5k power. So, all around, solid. You are probably never going to be able to pull off 5 of them, unless you're willing to drop basically your entire CB and Soul Blast on this, because Elwraith and Diantha combos, but good for you if you managed to pull it off. So yeah, 5 of those. That's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. All around, the deck is pretty solid, and it is definitely fun to play, being able to, swap between restanding front row and restanding a column, and being able to feel like you can go between 2 different Lianorns and still feeling like, unlike how the other Masques, where they did just feel like they kept the style intact and were extenders of the play to some extent. Zorga was a better extender than Unica was, etc. But how this feels not only like an extender, but it feels like an alternate way to play it. So all around, pretty great. I love this deck a lot. I think it's fun. So I'm going to end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't like, comment, subscribe, join us, follow Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to set up your Vanguards.